Hi there, my name is Philip Eidson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the show, I'm joined by Nishish Saxena, the head of Terminals Procurement, India and Middle East at Maersk. Nishish joined me in his personal capacity to unpack why procurement is so often undervalued and ignored as a critical business unit and strategic partner, and how an underdeveloped talent pool is helping to perpetuate these misconceptions. And that's something that Nishish is really passionate about, as you'll hear in the conversation. So we cover areas such as the evolution of procurement's value creation beyond potential supply chain and cost management, how educational institutions can help establish procurement as a critical strategic business discipline, and the core skill set that procurement needs to strengthen their talent pool and, of course, elevate our brand. So let's go into the episode where I start by asking Nishish if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Yeah, so I think anybody who listens to this podcast would know that this is one of the usual suspect. So even I was expecting it. And one of the days when I was just trying to frame my thoughts, I had spoken to Kelly, so she explained the format of the podcast. And I was just trying to frame my response to this one. And it was only then I had an aha moment. And it got me thinking that why this question sounds relevant when it's a procurement podcast. So in the context of procurement, this question is it sounds really relevant. Had it been a finance related podcast, the question wouldn't have sounded so relevant whether finance found you or you found finance. And that's where I was thinking that this perfectly plays into the topic at hand, which we want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe let's take a moment and reflect that why is it so relevant in the context of procurement. And you have been doing this podcast for long, and you may have these statistics in at least in my view.
Mm-hmm.
In most of the cases, the answer would be procurement found the individual.
Yeah, I don't have the stats, but anecdotally, I would say that's around a 99% rate, which is always interesting. How we don't go and I say we. There were some exceptions, of course, but most folks who I talked to didn't say, I want to go and find a career in procurement. It was, this situation happened, I saw about it from the outside, or I was placed in it and I had no idea what it was. And I got there and it was fun. And so I stayed there. And that's generally kind of the responses that we get.
Yeah, and it's no different in my case, but my whole emphasis has been around that despite being such a strong value creator, it is only coincidentally that people stumble onto it, right? And that's something which we need to consciously question, understand what is the implication of it, and then call for an action, which is basically, at least in my view, to recognize procurement as a discipline in itself.
Well, we're going to unpack that a little bit, but how did you stumble into procurement then?
Yeah, so I have an interesting story where I was doing my master's, and primarily most of the students were either going for marketing or finance. And I was also with the herd mentality chasing finance, but I could never connect with the subject. And one day I had at least the courage to say that I can't follow a path where my heart is not there.
Yeah.
And that is when I started to sort of ask questions to myself, what is of interest. And one thing which I found was that I was really interested in logistics and supply chain. That was primarily because it appeared to be something which touches everybody's life. in one way or the other, and it's mainly common sense. Uh, so I definitely went for supply chain,
Hmm.
and then through the campus, I got into an organization, and when working or undergoing the training as a management trainee out there, we were exposed to different aspects of supply chain, and yeah, in that organization, I can call that it was purchase
Yeah.
department,
Yeah.
uh, but I was still. Interested, and it appealed to me that whole aspect of building relationships yet negotiating with the same set of suppliers. It did fascinate me, and that's how procurement happened to me.
It's funny you said purchasing. I think I started off a whole debate with a LinkedIn post relatively recently where I see everybody, well, not everybody, I see a lot of people posting, this is what procurement is, this is what purchasing is, and they're very different. And, to me, I've always like rolled my eyes whenever I see that because it just depends on what industry you're in. It doesn't necessarily mean that purchasing is somehow, the stepchild to procurement being this big strategic thing. If you're working in a manufacturing industry, purchasing is just exactly the same as procurement. So that's certainly how I
Agree.
grew up. I grew up in automotive, and purchasing was just as air quotes strategic as somebody calling themselves procurement in a non-automotive business.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I think the perception gets created by the word itself, where purchase may
Yeah.
seem a little bit transactional because you are talking about buying
Mhm.
as an activity. Procurement in general, and maybe you are right that the way we have been groomed, it sounds as if it's encompassing much more.
Yeah.
But if you start double clicking and trying to figure out, then then you won't feel the two are very different.
Now, a post that you'd put on LinkedIn, I was really actually interested as I was just doing a little bit of research before the show. You talked about is procurement becoming a field job? Is it a desk job? Is it a field job? Why was that something you were interested in kind of exploring what the community felt of what kind of procurement, what kind of job procurement is?
Yeah, so there's this interesting story where we were having a conversation with people from other departments, and it was a brainstorming session. Which went okay, and while we were winding up, somebody made a remark that I really feel jealous of you guys, and then I inquisitively asked why. And the individual said, yeah, you guys get to enjoy the lunches and the dinners with the suppliers. We don't. And yeah, although the remark was made on a lighter note, it got me thinking that are these lunches and dinners or spending time with the suppliers, is it actually recreational or is it work?
Yeah.
And at least for me, the answer was that it is definitely not recreational. There is a lot of information which is exchanged. This is something which helps the relationship with the supplier and also assists category manager to gain some market intelligence out there. Uh, so definitely, this is something which is part of the job,
Yeah.
and and that's triggered the whole thought that if the work is happening outside your office space or when you are not sitting on your laptop, is when I thought that I would really like to hear the views of the community members out there.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. It's funny, we go back to the first question of why you got into procurement. One of the reasons why I stayed in procurement was because I saw all these opportunities to travel, and that was kind of one of the biggest benefits for me. But I would always have to fight for budget, to go and do that. I'd be fighting for each one of the business trips that I put forward. But I completely agree that procurement is best done as a field job, or at least partial field job, because it is. You're learning every single time you have a conversation with anybody, even if you're buying services, it's not just manufacturing. So you're learning, you're building relationships, you're getting a picture of the market, you're just doing things that you can't do
Yeah,
through anecdotes as much as anything.
very,
So,
very true,
I,
very true. And
sorry, go ahead.
I was saying that if you look at the two sets of stakeholder which are relevant for any procurement professional is, of course, the external set of stakeholders, which is primarily our suppliers. There could be some regulators, and then you have the internal set of stakeholders, which are the at least typically what we call as the business users.
Hmm.
And it is equally important to spend time with them, because that's where you get to understand the priorities of the business, where the focus is, what does the end customer need at the end of the day, and it enables you to make the right decisions as a procurement professional.
Yeah, it gives you more context, doesn't it? I recall, actually, it's kind of relevant to the role that you're head of ocean procurement. Back in the day, I was at Chiquita, and one of the things that I did, which sticks out in my mind the most, was I went to a banana plantation in Costa Rica, and basically followed the banana through the process, through the plantation, on the road to the port. I then flew to the port that it was arriving in, and then went on the journey from that port to the distribution center, the warehouses, and then to the store. And seeing that full process of essentially what we do. And that's when you realize a company like Chiquita, for example, is not necessarily a banana growing company, but it's a logistics and a marketing company.
True.
But following that gives you just so much more kind of context, I say, around decisions that you make, and how everything fits, and how you talk to stakeholders, and what's important and what's not important, that you never get when you just sat behind a desk.
True. Very true.
So the conversation we want to go a little bit more into today is around talent, but the perception of procurement. And you talked a little bit before around making procurement a profession that people actually want to come and join, as opposed to one that we all stumbled into. Why do you think that people continue to question what procurement's value proposition is?
Yeah, and I think before I answer that, let's take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really see the value? And at least that's the question which I ask myself, and also many a times discuss with the stakeholders and my team members. Now, for me, the proof is in the fact that if we rewind ourselves 2 years back, COVID pandemic situation, the whole supply chain went through disruption. And the key priority for any organization was on business continuity.
Yeah.
And that business continuity is coming from a major part of it is coming from the suppliers. So it was about focus on finding the right suppliers who may have equally robust contingency plans in place, and who can help the organization deliver value to the customers. Fast forwarding to the current scenario, the situation has completely changed. We have over inventory or overly stocked inventories. There has been inflation. However, in certain economies, we are also seeing sign of recession, right? And cost becomes a very relevant topic. And from that perspective, the directive has completely changed. Therefore, for an organization to retain the market share, it needs to be cost competitive. Now, in these two examples or scenarios, procurement is the one driving, right? Whether it is about maintaining business continuity by having the right suppliers and maintaining the relationship with them, or now going to the same set of suppliers and trying to bring the costs down. So procurement is very fundamental to any organization's strategy. I also try to slice and dice it from a different perspective, even if what we call as the organization curve, where any organization goes through the introduction stage, the growth stage, the maturity stage. Even there, the role of procurement can be directly linked to what the organization is trying to achieve. So, for an example, if it's in the introduction stage where the company is just starting, it may not have the volumes, but for it to deliver on its promise to the customer, it will need the best cost and the best service level. So you would want procurement to at least get those suppliers who are willing to invest in an organization which may not have a very strong presence or brand. uh, it takes a little bit of convincing, right? And where if you change it to the maturity stage where an organization is stable, the market share is stable, it comes down to cost leadership and making sure that we procurement is able to bring the cost down by standardizing the specifications, consolidating the demand, create economies of scale. uh, so even if you look from the different phases an organization goes through, procurement is a genuine value creator, right? And last is what I found very relevant or relatable was you talking about your experience with British Airways at an
Hmm.
airport where the one
Yeah,
of the service was
yeah,
outsourced,
yeah,
right? And how the supplier behaves
yeah.
or the third party operator behave becomes the identity of the British Airways and
Hmm.
the organization, right? So there is a very direct link to the brand of
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
decision procurement is taking.
You're outsourcing your reputation to a third party ultimately, and hoping that they are empowered or have the right culture or whatever it may be to act with that brand, at the forefront of their mind. And as we see, and yes, as you say, the experience that I gave, it's not usually the case.
Yeah, exactly. So at least when I think about these scenarios and look at whether procurement is creating value, and slice and dice in different ways, the answer has been consistent that yes, it does create value.
Hmm.
Um, then, of course, coming back to your question, that why is that value not recognized?
Yeah.
And go
I
ahead.
was going. Yeah, there was a couple of things I think that I wanted to bring up and ask you about. One that um, follows on from that kind of question is, in my mind, especially when you're lower on the maturity curve from a procurement organizational maturity, it's around what our role is to provide different outcomes than if the business stakeholders did it themselves, because business stakeholders would have found a way to have manage supply chain constraints and availability. They would have found a way in some way, shape, or form to manage inflation. But would their results be the same as the results that we as a procurement organization were able to drive? And so that's the question: is how do we demonstrate really that we're able to generate better results than what the stakeholders can do on their own? Because that's the gap. Because I think all stakeholders come in and say, well, I'm an expert in this area for 20 years. Why do I need procurement's help? So that's kind of the difficult hurdle to overcome to demonstrate the value that we really drive.
Yeah, though I think it's very relevant, Phil, and the reason, I mean, to be honest, if anybody were to come and ask me whether I can do sales,
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe I can
Mm-hmm.
I can go and try selling a product that I
Yeah.
believe in, right? With the right education, can I do finance? Maybe yes. Um, so it's I, but we don't typically ask those questions
Mm-hmm.
because we let the experts do the job. In case of procurement, I personally feel that because it's not recognized as a discipline,
Yeah.
there is no specific skill set attached to it.
Yeah.
And that is what creates a perception that anybody can go and do procurement. One joke that I keep cracking in different meetings is that everybody seems to think that they are the best negotiators, or at least they can
Yeah.
negotiate better than the other person. So that for me is also a proof point to say that that of course, because they don't see specific skill sets
Mm-hmm.
attached to procurement, they don't see it as a discipline which has been built over a period of time. There is this thought that anybody can do it.
Yeah. Um, I want to come back to that in a second because that's kind of an important, I think, segue into the second part of our discussion. What I wanted to ask, just on the topic of value, is you talked about cost management, we talked about security of supply. I think that those are two fundamental procurement value drivers. But How do you think about expanding, or should we be expanding? Because we talk a lot about value beyond savings, and other areas that we can create value, because that keeps us relevant when security of supply and cost management isn't as important in the business cycle. Now, there's probably an argument to say that with how fast everything's changing, will there ever be a time again when security of supply and cost management are not part of the business cycle? But how do you feel about expanding the value proposition as you mature, so that you become known and relevant for more than just those two kind of fundamentals?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to it, at least in my view. One is that procurement can be a very strong market intelligence function too, which can feed back a lot of information uh, back to the organization. Now, for an example, and this is coming from our suppliers, uh, who might be dealing with a lot of customers who are part of the same industry. Uh, Now, different organizations or slash customers will be on different uh, growth trajectories.
Yeah,
Some might be more mature, some might be at a nascent stage, some might be growing, and there could be others which might be declining or trying to find the next big thing
yeah,
as an organization. So suppliers have a lot of information
yeah,
and experience to share,
yeah,
and they can really help an organization to either co-create
yeah,
or transform
yeah.
into something much bigger. So that's something which procurement can drive through the suppliers. We are seeing examples of company which are driving innovation by
Mhm.
working closely with the suppliers, and that gives the organization an edge. So it's definitely beyond cost,
Uh,
so to say.
yeah, we talk a lot about the fact that the supply base has so many more multiples more R&D capability and capacity than you will ever have, even if you're the biggest company in the world. um, and actually, I think this ties back into, is this a desk job or is this a field job? Because one of the primary ways that you start to understand and hear on the street about innovations that are being made, or make the case of why a supplier or a potential supplier, you may be going and developing a supplier that isn't a supplier to you yet. You learn that by being on the street and having these conversations with them and building those relationships. You don't sit there and wait to stumble across them. But there's so much opportunity for procurement in that space to bring in lots of supply based innovation, to then help inform either business process if it's services related, or product if it's can be product related innovation too.
Fully agree. And I mean, if we want to make it very relatable, when we went back to office after a couple of years of working from home, uh, we realized that when we have the team members sitting very closely with each other physically, the ideation happens in a very natural way.
Mm-hmm.
Because it could be over a cup of coffee that you start to discuss certain ideas that you may have on your mind, and people start to build on it.
Yeah.
And and this is exactly what needs to be done with the suppliers. It's when you actually sit and spend time with them is that ideation can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and you can actually put your business problems, the real business problems, and spar with the suppliers. As you said, they have a lot more knowledge
Yeah.
than a single organization would ever have, and that's something which is to be leveraged. So that's definitely a value which procurement brings. I just wanted to share another aspect.
Mm-hmm.
uh, is now I This happened in a meeting with a very senior leader from the commercial department, and he told me that these days the sales organization, the commercial team is spending most of their time with the procurement team
Yeah.
on the customer side.
Yeah.
And that's where we started to discuss that we understand how the procurement
Yeah.
professionals think, uh, and we can really assist the sales organization in using a language which a procurement professional would found
Mhm.
relatable. So this would just give an extra edge, right? Whether it's about uh, making a pitch which demonstrates a TCO mindset to a procurement professional, or be it a total value of ownership. All these things can assist the sales, and that's something which was recognized even by the senior commercial leader. So this is also one of the aspects where procurement can go beyond the cost leadership aspect, and actually support the revenue of the organization in a very tangible manner.
Yeah, I think that's such a missed opportunity for procurement to be able to bring that value to the sales. But you think about it, even in the reverse as well. There's an opportunity for sales to do the same, to help procurement to understand the sales tactics that are being used against them too. And so you have these two departments in organizations that typically are completely siloed from each other, and we never talk to each other, where there would be
True.
so much benefit from helping each other.
Very true.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, and you talked about procurement not being recognized as a discipline, and that providing challenges that anybody can do it. Um, if we were to be recognized as a discipline from a skill set perspective, what do you think that should be? Is that, well, a procurement person is a negotiator, or is it a procurement person? The discipline of procurement is somebody who understands supply markets and can build relationships, and kind of the softer skills. Where would we be best positioning ourselves as being experts in as a procurement professional? If it was recognized as a formal discipline, like finance professions are, like engineering professionals are, and other such areas.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, there are some core skill set
Mhm.
which would be consistent across the board, which which will be the aspects of having an analytical mindset, uh, the ability to negotiate, and build relationships, and also to a large extent be comfortable with conflict management, because
Yeah.
most of the suppliers that you build relationship with, you are also tasked to negotiate with them,
Mhm.
and that ability of finding the right balance, or being able to pull it off, is definitely a skill to be had. So there will be certain elements which will be consistent across the board, and then I think it will also be driven by where the organization is heading,
Yeah.
um, because those asks may change. Um, if it is about the maturity stage and driving standardization, then it will also come down to challenging a lot of stakeholders, convincing them that coming up with different specifications may not help,
Hmm.
or making sure that we specify what we really need. We don't over specify, we don't under specify. So there's a little bit of stakeholder management which becomes uh, very relevant out there. In some cases, if the organization is going through the change, it will be the change management, be it towards the suppliers or the stakeholders within the organization. So I think there's a part or layer which will keep evolving,
Yeah.
and then there's a fixed part to it.
Yeah. I feel that you can have all the technical skills in the world, and not to say that you don't need those technical skills, but if you can't sell them, and you can't drive change, and you can't build relationships, you're kind of talking to yourself. That's what you
True.
need the ability to do, is turn those into influence ultimately.
Yes.
And influence is probably the biggest skill that maybe that we miss. I'm not sure. I mean, not everybody, but I think as a profession, we sometimes miss that ability. We know our data, but we're not necessarily the strongest, I think, across the board at then turning that data into influence and driving change.
Yeah, and what we really need to think, Phil, it's a great point that the ability to influence is key,
Mhm.
but how do we develop it, even
Yeah.
if we know it, right? Is there anybody who is working towards identifying these skills apart from the leaders who are in procurement.
Yeah.
And by that I mean the academia and the
Mhm.
academics,
Yep.
the universities. They have to come together to really drive some of these aspects forward. It's, at least in my view, it's not practically possible for a leader to identify all these changes while most of the bandwidth is allocated towards running the show on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
um, and there has to be a different section which focuses on the skills which are needed today. How do we own the professionals, and also who is thinking about the future, who is thinking about what next.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very much reacting to the need of the hour
Yeah.
rather than somebody investing time in certain research and identifying these skills which will be required or which will be relevant, say 10 years down the line.
Yeah, and I feel that what we're missing in some regards is an advocate. Like, who's advocating for procurement? And I've talked about this quite a bit. You know, a lot of times in an organization, the folks advocating for procurement are consulting companies, for example, who have, finished a transformation in a different area of the business, and they see they can continue their fees by doing a transformation in procurement. Or it may be some executives who've worked in a different company where procurement has been more mature and they've seen firsthand, the value that procurement can bring. But aside from that, I don't see a lot of people advocating for procurement to be a discipline, for example. Because we need that to advocate to higher education. So higher education put us a focus on being able to develop programs, for example, to position procurement as being an attractive discipline for people to want to enter. Is that, do you think, is that on company? Is it the responsibility of a company and collectively, procurement departments around the world to advocate for procurement and build relationship programs and exchanges and things like that where they can with local education bodies? Or who's the one that's going to play, do you think, to bridge that gap?
Even I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think it's the responsibility of anybody, but it's in the best interest
Yeah.
of everybody that we really recognize. Because today, if we start looking at the different aspects, right at the time of recruiting fresh talent, the right resource pool is not available, so that talent incubation is not happening,
Mm.
and that's where at least I've been in a position where I've been recruiting for quite some time now, and most of the options, if we really want to spread our wings, that we get profiles of individuals who have been in sales or
Mhm.
individuals who have been finance and they
Yeah.
want to experiment or try something new.
Yeah.
uh, and and only a small percentage of people who have been actually doing procurement and are passionate to grow within that field. And this is not to say that procurement needs to recruit only from one fixed pool,
Yeah.
but at least the leaders need to have the option, and that will only happen if we have the talent incubation happening, which primarily means the universities recognizing it as a discipline and making sure that individuals acquire a certain level of skills and are ready to be injected into the corporate setup.
Yeah, I think that diversity of thought is really important within, and diversity of experiences is really important within a procurement organization as it becomes more commercial. So those folks who have got sales experience and marketing experience, I think that there's a lot of value on people coming from outside the procurement profession into procurement and helping us think differently, helping us bring stronger relationships with stakeholders, because a lot of times off the bat they're more respected because they've been on the other side of the table. But there is also this core which doesn't exist, which is really what you're talking about, of the fundamental, the technical procurement folks who and kind of the conveyor belt of bringing people into the profession so they can grow in the profession. And it's kind of, that's what's missing, I think. And a lot of times with the challenge with traditional procurement talent is sometimes, and I think by virtue of the folks that we talk about change all the time, most of the people listening to this podcast are not in this group because they're wanting to challenge themselves. They're wanting to think about how they can, add impact and make a difference in a different way. But there's a lot of folks who are operating in the same way that they've operated for 20 years and 25 years. And that's not necessarily the pool of talent that you want to bring along, continue to bring along, because there's a lot of kind of older, more traditional thoughts in that cohort versus how do we think differently about what procurement can do, the impact that we can have, and the way we build relationships with suppliers. So I can definitely see kind of that opportunity to bring more of a focused conveyor belt, if you will, of talent into procurement that has a slightly different grounding than showing up on day one like I did and being told this is what purchasing does, and you kind of hope that you figure it out. At that point, it's just down to the individuals.
I fully agree. And if at some point it becomes a vicious cycle, to be honest, because you don't get resources who can hit the ground running, if I can call it, from day one, um, is that means that as a procurement leader, you need to invest a lot more time in grooming the team.
Yeah.
Because one is to have the diversity of thoughts and people from different functions, a certain percentage of it. And the other is when you have almost everybody outside procurement, at least towards the starting stage, and you have to invest time in grooming them. And that's where, because of limited bandwidth, many of the leaders may drop the ball. And to defend them, one, they don't have the bandwidth. Second is, who is investing time in identifying the skill sets, in identifying the researchers, who is making sure that the best practices from different industries is happening, and somebody is enabling that, right?
Yeah.
Because many a times when I speak to my counterparts in the banking industry, it's very advanced when it comes to the digital adoption within procurement, where we can learn. If you look at automotive, and some of the other sectors, they are very good at supply relationship
Yeah.
management and supply enabled innovation. So there's a lot to be learned from different industries, but the same function within the same function. And that's also not happening. And there again, I would see, if you have universities and the academia supporting procurement, it will start to happen in a very natural manner.
Yeah.
Right. And all of this has a very snowballing effect. And in most of the cases, procurement continues to play the catch up game,
Yeah.
and misses out on the opportunity to show that it can be proactive in defining and contributing towards the strategy of an organization, rather than just being an enabler.
Yeah. Now, I think these are all things that probably some organizations have tried to solve for a long time, and we've never really got over the line. But I'm thinking about, as we kind of come to the end of the conversation, calls to action. What I can think of is, any organization of any size can start to build a relationship with local, universities, for example, or colleges around procurement and what procurement is, and start advocating and look to do, whether it's internship programs or just kind of start the dialogue. If you're a large company, obviously you have the ability to do that yourself because you have opportunities. That's how I got started. I got started with graduate programs with General Motors and then with Ford. If you're a much smaller company, you can actually band together with other procurement leaders within your community and see if you can do that kind of collectively and go together to a local a local college or a local university to, again, at least start the dialogue. And that doesn't mean that we're all of a sudden in 2 years' time going to have, this is what procurement should look like, and this is the license that we need, and all those good things like that. But it does mean that we can start having more conversations where procurement becomes more than just a few lines in a supply chain degree, for example. And you kind of got to start somewhere.
Fully agree. And I'm also seeing that the trend is building up. You have institutes like SIPS, and some of the others which are coming together to create that community out there, and the conversations are happening. But I think the need of the hour is to take action, and
Yeah.
somebody has to start out there. And I fully agree with your idea of the companies partnering with the local institutions,
Hmm.
universities or colleges, whatever they are called, uh, to create some course
Yeah.
around procurement and create that talent pool out there.
Start the relationship, go and lecture for, in the program, do anything that we can to at least start building up this interest outside of the profession, rather than it just being, I fell into it and I loved it. Which again, going all the way back to the beginning, is where the vast majority of folks start. So I know it's time to wrap up, Nishish. I really thank you so much for your time. It's been a really kind of thought-provoking conversation. If anybody is interested in connecting with you directly, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so these days I'm putting in a very conscious effort of being responsive on LinkedIn. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be the best place. They can reach out or find me with the name Nishish Saxena on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and I will try my best to respond
All
to
right.
the request, or if there's any query, then I will also try responding to it.
Perfect. Well, I'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile, as we always do, in the show notes for today's episode. Those can be found along with all the other podcasts that we have published to date at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. Nishish, one last time, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, and thanks for providing the platform. I think what we discussed today is something which needs a lot more voice,
Mhm.
and you gave the thoughts the voice. I hope it will inspire some sort of change out there.
You, the kind of final parting thoughts, I think we're all in this together. We all want to advocate for procurement. We all want to see the procurement profession grow and get stronger and get better recognition, by driving better results for our businesses. And so as much as we can all do together in that effort, I think, helps us all. If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, an event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.